Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Odd and Untold. This is episode 8. And this week I'm doing something a little different. I was on vacation last week, so I haven't really had much time to prepare a huge episode here. I didn't have any guests lined up. I mean, I have people I want to get on the show, but I just really haven't had the time to schedule anyone in. And I figured this was a good time to talk about something that happened at the place where I vacationed last week, which is a campground in Connecticut called Point Folly from the White Memorial Foundation. And Point Folly is on Bantam Lake. Bantam Lake stretches through Morris County and Litchfield County in Connecticut. And I have been camping there since I can remember. Very small child, probably 5 or 6 years old. I'm 48 now, so you can do the math there, probably better than I can. And we used to go like twice a year if we could, sometimes just once a year, but we'd go up every summer and nice family campgrounds right on the lake. And we'd have our own little put-ins there where we could just go swimming. And at night, we'd have a nice campfire and look up at the night sky. Really a big part of my childhood, part of my family. And we went last week. My son came, Jake, and my father, Gary, my uncle, Neil. And the four of us went up there starting last Sunday and came home on Wednesday. It was a great trip. We had really good weather. And right before we went, my father had seen on TV on the Travel Channel a show called UFO Witness. And in season 1, episode 2, they talk about the Bantam Lake UFO. And when my father mentioned this to me, I immediately remembered it because I blogged about it years ago, and I'm going to put that up on the screen right now if I can find it. So here it is. This is an article I had done back in 2012 about an alleged UFO that fell into Bantam Lake in Litchfield, Connecticut. And so I'm going to read the article for you guys just so you can hear what was initially reported. And then I'll talk about the show UFO Witness, and then I'll talk about some of my own thoughts and some personal experiences I had up there. So this is from the Connecticut Register back in April of 2012. So I'm going to read from the article right now. It was quiet on Bantam Lake Thursday afternoon with a few scattered showers, but no UFOs. That's what reporters from Eyewitness News, the Connecticut CBS affiliate, and NBC Connecticut news crews were looking for at a parking area on North Shore Road in Bantam, or at least a good follow-up to a story first reported by the Republican American of Waterbury. The story in Thursday morning's paper recounted reports of a glowing, unidentified falling object, that's a new one for UFO, but it tracks, disappearing into Bantam Lake after midnight on Monday. I think it's pretty exciting, the possibility of a UFO, but highly unlikely, said Litchfield resident Marie Doyen, hope I'm pronouncing that right, who was out Thursday afternoon at Bantam Lake, which spans the towns of Litchfield and Morris and is Connecticut's largest natural lake. It's actually a very big lake. Love camping on there. Back to the article. According to a report posted by the Associated Press, authorities said they didn't find anything after a state trooper and another person reported the large object falling out of the sky. The Republican American reported that a person driving in Litchfield at about 2 a.m. Tuesday reported that a green glowing object the size of a whale fell from the sky and crashed into Bantam Lake. Officials say that at about the same time, a state trooper 10 miles away in Warren called dispatchers to report that something fell out of the sky and landed near Bantam or Morris, the AP story said. Morris firefighters made several passes up and down the lake in a boat looking for a possible plane crash, but didn't find any debris, according to the AP story, which said authorities called off the search, leaving the mystery unsolved. I've heard people talking about it. It was green, glowing, whale-sized of an object, said Lindsay Vanyo, an employee at the Green Tomato Deli in Morris, which was formerly the Ripe Tomato and is now under new ownership. Litchfield resident Tina Landau said she just heard about it Thursday morning. It's kind of freaky, and at this point, nobody seems to know. It's pretty wild, said Miss Landau, who lives about a mile from Bantam Lake. I have a pretty open mind about things, but I'm still curious. Moore's first selectman, Barbara Bongiolotti, hope I'm pronouncing that right, said she didn't know anything about the incident until she heard about it from her highway foreman. I have no idea what it might have been or what it was about, said Miss Bongiolotti. Miss Bongiolotti said the Morris firefighters told that they found nothing when they went out. That's a word missing there. According to a report posted by WTNH News 8, the National Weather Service said there was a meteor shower in the area that morning. Goshen resident Bob Lay called the Litchfield County Times late Thursday afternoon and told the newspaper he and two friends saw exactly the same thing in the same spot 2 years ago around the same time. We looked at each other and said, "What the heck is that?" Mr. Lay recalled. Mr. Lay said it came out of the sky pretty much like a green blob. The whole horizon lit up, that weird green glow, and then that was it, said Mr. Lay. So that's the story. And I can say for a fact that you can see a lot of weird stuff out there, especially back in the day. Nowadays, there's a little bit more light pollution, but when I was younger, I had seen a lot of weird things up in the sky. This, to me, does not sound like a UFO. It sounds like a meteorite, even though it was green. So I've never really subscribed to the fact that it was a UFO. I think if it were, the entire lake would have been closed off. The military would have been in there. The lake at its deepest point is about 25 feet deep. So nothing could really hide in there. I mean, nothing large could really hide in there. It's a very rocky lake. It's a glacial lake. So tons of rocks and boulders. And you could be swimming 100 yards from shore and find a huge boulder and stand on it. And it looks like you're walking on water. So honestly, I don't think an alien spacecraft landed in Bantam Lake. It's a very interesting story. I think just for me personally, someone who's camped on the lake his entire life, knows the land, knows the peninsula like the back of my hand. And I'm going to bring up a photo of the peninsula here in a second, just with the map. But it's a small stretch of land. It's a large lake. I've seen a lot of strange things out there, but no craft could land in that lake and not be found. Again, it's not a very deep lake. You can go out easily very far from shore, and you're still probably only about 10 feet of water, 15 feet of water. So let me pull up, just for anybody watching on video. So here we have the map, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see Point Folly here. It's a peninsula that just dips south into the lake. And I'm going to just kind of see if I can drop a pin right about where I camp. So I can't, but right where my cursor is, our campsite's on the east side of the peninsula. And apparently from this show UFO Witness, that's where they're saying that the meteorite crash landed, is kind of just east of Point Folly and just west of Marsh Point. So if you're looking at a map of the lake, that's basically where they're saying it crashed. Now, on the show UFO Witness, they speak to the fire chief. He says his daughter lived on the lake at the time that this happened, and when the object passed overhead, it killed the power. So their power went out, all the lights went out. Once it crashed, I guess all the power came back on. So the hosts of this show, UFO Witness, were sort of saying that that is evidence that it might be a UFO. I strongly disagree with that. I feel like we don't know if UFOs even exist. So how do we know what behaviors they exhibit or what effects they would have on electricity or homes? The one interesting thing he did say was that when he got to the lake, there were tons of waves crashing on the shore, and it lasted a long time. And this is a very still lake. And even if you have a big motorboat going really fast, you will get some waves crashing on the shore, and they can get pretty big, but they last a minute or two. You know, it's a very large lake. It's a still lake. And so I did find that interesting. So it does prove that something fell into the lake. I don't think it proves that a UFO fell into the lake. So again, it's TV. You got to be careful about what you see on TV. They had also taken an EMF detector to the shoreline, and they got a few hits. And, you know, of course, that means there's a UFO in there. Again, it's a shallow lake, all things considered. It's very large area-wise, but depth, 25 feet tops. And most places, it's going to be about 10, 15 feet. I've been out in the raft. I've dropped anchor overboard, and it you know, you could be out real far, and that anchor is going down about 8 feet, 10 feet, maybe 12 feet at some points. For the most part, it's a pretty shallow lake. If any alien craft fell in there, it would not be well hidden. And there's a lot of people living on the lake. People would have seen it. People would have seen military cordoning off the lake and using their equipment to go in and retrieve this crashed alien craft. So I'm not buying that this was a UFO. It was a UFO only in the fact that it was unidentified. We don't know what it was, but I'm pretty confident in saying that this was a meteor crashing into the lake. Very cool story, especially since this is like almost like a second home for me. I've just been going there for so many years, have so many great memories of this place. It's just a family tradition to go every summer. And to know that something happened so close is really cool. And of course, if you play the name game, if you've followed Lauren Coleman in some of his books, he talks about the name game. And I'm going to scroll back up to my article because I kind of talk about this here. So I'm going to read from my article what I wrote. I always pay attention to place names, thanks to Lauren Coleman's name game discussion in his books, as they are usually interesting when it comes to the history of a town. A lich usually refers to a type of undead creature, from the German and Dutch words for corpse. So it's always been interesting for me knowing that Litchfield is a hotspot of paranormal activity. You have the Winstead Wild Man, which is a Bigfoot report from the 1800s. A lot of UFO sightings up there. Connecticut is rife with ghost stories. So it's always interesting to me to pay attention to these names. And again, if I had known this when I was much younger, I probably would have been much more frightened to camp there. But it's a really cool place to go and just relaxing. And I love being there. I love being on the lake. And it's just cool that something made the news. Again, not major news. A lot of people didn't even know this happened. People I know who know of Bantam Lake didn't know this happened. I just happen to know because I follow UFO news, and when a UFO allegedly crashes in a place that I'm very familiar with, I'm going to pay attention. So I did my blog post years ago, a little over 10 years ago now, and they're still talking about it on TV. Just now they started talking about it. But so the show was interesting, but again, I think they jumped to a few interesting conclusions that I don't agree with, that this is definitely a UFO. I don't think it was. I think it's a meteor. Whale sized, I don't know what that means, or shaped. Very large, I'm guessing, larger than a car, but not much bigger. Otherwise, it would have done a lot more damage. So yeah, that was very cool. And I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about that because that's where I was last week. There's going to be a video coming up on the YouTube channel. It's not a podcast. It's going to be a full video on just the little excursion me, my father, and my son took on our raft out to the bay off of Point Folly, near Camp Hope. So a little bit northeast of our campsite, because again, that's where the TV show said this thing allegedly crashed. So we went out there and we took an EMF detector. We took a magnet on a rope, and we were just trying to see what we could pull up from the lake bed. We picked up a screw and some rocks, and that was about it. Nothing extraterrestrial. So, but it was very cool. It was fun. We had a good time being out on the raft and on the lake, and just, towing my son behind in a smaller raft. And my dad was rowing, and I was doing my silly recording here. So that'll be a video on the YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. And before I go, this is going to be a shorter video this week, shorter podcast, because I just, like I said, I'm very tired and had a lot going on this week. But I did want to talk about one weird encounter that I had on Bantam Lake. I've had a few, but this one is related because it's UFO. Back in college, and this involves my friend John, who was on the podcast last week. If you listened last week, he was telling some ghost stories, but we had a weird experience. He actually had some weird experiences at Bantam Lake too. So I want to get him on and talk about this story and some of the other stuff that he experienced on his own. But there was one night we were on Point Folly. We went down to the point of the peninsula, so the southernmost tip of the peninsula, and we were just kind of looking east, southeast, and there's a landmass out there. And this is a couple of years after he had started coming with me, and we were commenting because we saw a red light on the horizon, a little bit above the landmass, above the hill. And it was nighttime. It was probably 11 o'clock at night. And we were just sitting by the water, and we noticed a red light on the horizon. It wasn't blinking. It wasn't moving. No other lights to it. It was just a solid red light. Looked like the top light of a radio antenna or a water tower. And we had commented to each other how we didn't notice during the day that there were any towers out there, but we knew the surrounding areas were being built up and there were bigger and bigger stores coming to town and a little bit of a glow on the horizon from neighboring towns that hadn't been there in years past. And we were kind of lamenting the development of the area that, we're city boys, we're from Brooklyn. So coming up to Litchfield, Connecticut, Bantam, Connecticut, and just being able to see all the stars and the Milky Way. And it was great for us as kids. We were probably at this point, he'd been coming for a few years. So we maybe were 20, 21. And we had seen this red light and we were just sitting at the point on some rocks and talking about life, talking about school, talking about girls, talking about whatever was on our minds. And we sat there for about a half an hour. And then we noticed that this red light had then started to move. It had been there for about a half an hour, no blinking, no navigation lights, just a solid red light. And then it started moving. It started moving north, up towards the north side of the lake and towards our campsite. So we said, oh, we got to go back anyway. Let's see if we can follow this thing. And as we started walking, it started moving north faster and faster and faster. And the entire time, not a single blinking light, no navigation lights, no white lights. This was clearly not a plane. It was a solid red. And I'm not even talking like red tint. It was like a deep, deep red light. And it was low. It wasn't high up in the sky. It was low. Like I said, we thought it was a radio tower. It was that close to the horizon, the landmass across the way. It just looked like it was just barely peeking above the trees. And then as it started moving, it did look like it was getting higher, but it was just red and it was big. Like I said, there was no way this was a plane that I could tell. There was no navigation lights. There was no sound. There was no jet engine noise, no propeller noise. And again, up there, we would hear planes going overhead all the time, even really high ones that look like little tiny pinpricks in the sky. You would hear that go over, and then, a few seconds later, you'd hear the faint drone of a jet engine, especially at night, very quiet up there. So that was weird for us to see this pure red light with nothing else on it. And again, if we had seen it moving from the get-go, I would even then say it was a plane. But this thing just sat on the horizon for about a half an hour, and then it started moving. And that to us was very interesting, that we watched it for half an hour. We were just looking at it, kind of lamenting the development of the surrounding area. And then it started moving after about a half an hour. So I don't know any plane that could be coming towards you for a half an hour and not grow any bigger nor smaller, not move its position, and then suddenly just kind of dart off to the north very quickly. And we started walking back to our campsite, which is not very far. And this thing was gone by the time we got to our campsite, disappeared over the horizon. So still don't know what it was. UFO in that it was unidentified, because it could have been any number of things. Again, this is probably 20, and do the math again. We were maybe 21, we're 48 now. So you're looking at 27 years ago. I don't think people had drones. I don't know of anything that could be in the sky that didn't make noise. No engine noise, no propeller noise, nothing. So very interesting story. And I will have John on to talk about that in the future, because his memory is always better than mine. So I'm giving you a broad overview, and his details will probably help fill in some things here, because he remembers things better than I do. He's got a great memory, and I don't. So, but wanted to share that. I've seen a few other weird things out there. Again, I talked about this to Seth Breedlove on the first 2 episodes of this podcast, about how you spend enough time out in the outdoors, looking up at the sky, looking into the tree line, you're going to see some weird stuff. You're going to see stuff you can't explain. And I certainly did. So thank you for listening, everybody. And if you want to read more about Bantam Lake, it's very easy to Google. It's the largest lake in Connecticut. Just do Bantam, Connecticut. You'll find Bantam Lake. You'll clearly see Point Folly. And if you watch the video on YouTube, you'll see where I was pointing my cursor, where our campsites are at. And you can sort of get an idea of where this meteorite may have crashed. And you'll get an idea of where John and I were kind of seeing this red light and where it went to. So next week, I'll be back with a longer episode, hopefully some guests. Have a few things in the works. and hope to have them on in the near future. And again, John will be back on. Josh Diaz will be back on. Scott Perry is going to be back on. So we got some good stuff coming up. Thanks again for listening, and check out our YouTube channel. Please give us a subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I'm going to put links to my blog in the description here, so you can go right to the blog post and read about this initial UFO, quote unquote, UFO story. Thanks again for listening, everybody. See you next week.